Of 8, House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford. Chairman, you heard from Marco Rubio, who also was the chairman. He was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Do you feel like the notification was proper and timely?
Yeah, I do, and here's why. You just heard the president say you need to keep that universe of individuals who know what's going on to a bare minimum for operational security. And when you open the door to congressional notification, you're basically opening the door to potential leaks. Now, I get that. Now, as a member of Gang of 8, I got to be careful about what I say and how I say it. But the reality is, there was no congressional notification requirement here because this was a law enforcement action, first and foremost. Secondly, even if there was a congressional notification, there's not a pre-notification requirement, which plays into the idea of operational security. You have to maintain, if we're going to keep our operators safe, we have to maintain the highest degree of operational security to ensure mission success. That was what was taking place here. I got a call from not only Secretary Rubio, but Secretary Hegseth in the immediate aftermath of this action. And basically, what Secretary Rubio said was exactly what he just said in that press report, that it was a trigger-based operation that had to be made in real time with various considerations, both weather and intelligence and everything that was required to be able to execute this in a timely fashion and to optimize the idea that we're going to actually get a success here.
Not only did our special operators execute this flawlessly, but obviously there was incredible intelligence that we will never hear or see, sources and methods and people putting their lives on the line to make this possible. Maybe talk to that, but also I really want to understand what's happening in the region, because you can't have this discussion without talking about the implications to Cuba, which is it's always been teetering on being a failed state, but without the support financially, oil, etc., from Venezuela, what do you see happening in Cuba?
Well, Cuba has for a long time been essentially trafficking in healthcare. That is to say, they've made folks in Venezuela and Nicaragua and other countries in the Western Hemisphere believe that they were the preeminent healthcare providers in the region. I've been there many, many times, and I can tell you that Cuba is not the preeminent healthcare provider in the Western Hemisphere. But what they've done is they have essentially bartered healthcare services where they're deploying doctors to countries like Venezuela in exchange for oil. Now, advance that even a little more, they're also exchanging military services. That is to say, everybody around Maduro were Cubans. The colectivos that were exercising control in Venezuela, Cuban. That's what they do. That's their stock and trade, and that's the only thing that's kept them afloat. Now, with Venezuela out of the picture, potentially, what does that do to Cuba, which is teetering on, as you suggested, on the brink of failed state status? It puts them in a really tough place. Now, I've been to Cuba many times, and every time I've been there, it seems like there's always a brownout or a blackout, or some conditions are terrible. Cuba has great potential, but not under communist leadership. And I surely don't want to see New York City come to the same situation that exists, because communists typically tend to make bad decisions, and it's a failed model of governance. But we see this in Nicaragua, we see it in Venezuela, we see it in Cuba. That is the communist triad, if you will, that exists in the Western Hemisphere. And those three countries are inextricably linked. So by getting rid of Maduro, you're making it much more difficult for Cuba to operate and for Nicaragua to operate to forward the communist agenda in the Western Hemisphere.
Very quickly, we only have a short amount of time. Talk to us about the Venezuelans that were basically being imported into the United States of America, because this is not, a grandma who's just trying to take care of business. There are a lot of thugs and drugs that were flowing from Venezuela.
No question about it. Tren de Aragua is one part of that. The Cartel de Soles is the other. And what Maduro did was create a safe operating space for cartels and everything that implies not only narcotics, but illicit trafficking of humans, and really availing themselves of those transit routes up through places like the Darien Gap in Panama, traversing north through Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and then Mexico ultimately presenting on the southern border of the United States. This was under the Biden administration allowed basically to happen, even though the Biden administration acknowledged that Maduro was not a legitimate president, but no action was ever taken to stop that. And President Trump said, nope, not on my watch. We're going to stop it. Not only are we going to shut down our border, but we're also going to go to the root cause. You've heard that term before. The root cause of irregular migration is criminal activity that the cartels support, and people like Maduro were given safe passage.
Yeah. The Biden administration was all bark and no action, as you just articulated. Congressman Rick Crawford,
absolutely.
chairman of the House Intelligence